Working from home comes with plenty of perks, but it also has downsides, like answering emails and calls after hours, which can blur the lines between work and personal time. It's just one reason why the Ontario government is proposing new legislation that would require employers to give workers the right to disconnect, which sounds good in theory, but just how feasible would it be to implement? And joining us now with some insight is employment lawyer Lior Samfiru. Thanks so much for joining us, Lior.
Thanks, Candace.
So if you could put this right to disconnect law in a nutshell for us and tell us what it would entail.
So what the Ontario government has announced is that employers that have 25 employees or more are going to be required to implement policies that specifically state that their employees have a right to be off work and not to engage in any work-related communications off hours, be it emails, be it phone calls, Zoom calls, etc. The idea, of course, being that in a connected world where we're all connected to our smart devices, it's easy for employees to just work constantly around the clock. So the idea is that to give employees that time where they know that they don't have to be in touch with work, they don't have to deal with any workplace issues.
Okay, so how practical would this policy actually be for employers to roll out, and especially in jobs like this one where, you know, the news cycle is 24 hours, say the medical field, or even like traders who have to deal with different time zones?
Yeah, Candace, I have a hard time believing that people in your field will be actually able to disconnect. And the reality is that even though this is a good idea in theory, it's certainly a welcome notion, I don't think it's feasible, and I don't think a policy or a law like that has any teeth. First of all, who is going to actually monitor that the employees are not doing work off hours? The government's not going to be able to do that. It's very easy for employers to say, yes, we have a policy, we wrote it, we put it in a drawer, now we forgot about it. The other thing is this: if an employee thinks that their colleagues are not going to be disconnected, their colleagues are still going to be answering emails, they're going to feel compelled to do that as well. There's competition in the workplace, and no one's going to want to feel that they're behind or their career is being impacted. I just don't think it's feasible. I don't think it's practical. I don't think a law like that is going to do much. So it's an idea that's meant to look good, to say that we're trying to do something. I really don't see how in the modern workplace that's going to have any meaningful effect.
Yeah, because, you know, those were just three industries that I listed, but really, you know, within the province, there are so many sectors that would be impacted by this legislation. So, you know, as an expert in labor law with your knowledge of the ins and outs of current legislation already in place, where do you think the government could better focus their efforts where work-life balance is concerned and maybe improve this proposal to work better with the structures already in place?
Absolutely. One idea may be, let's make our overtime rules better. Let's make sure that people are compensated properly if they do work extra hours. If an employer believes that now they're going to have to pay people for working that extra time, see how fast they do things to try to implement better practices to allow people to disconnect. So overtime, we have overtime rules. Let's make them better, stronger. Beyond that, how about vacation time? Minimum vacation for most people is 2 weeks. Well, if that could be increased to 3 weeks or even beyond, that's additional time that employees can take for themselves to be off work. So those are a couple of ideas where meaningful change can be made, not this disconnecting from work law that the government has announced.
Gotcha. So the Ford government also introduced legislation that would bar non-compete clauses. And for those of you that don't know, that's a clause that prevents an employee from leaving one company to take a new job with a direct competitor. So what can you tell us about that, and how would that help? What impact would that have?
Well, unlike what we said before, I think this law or this policy is a good idea. Now, in Canada, generally, our courts have said that we don't enforce non-compete agreements because we don't like things that prevent people from earning a living. But despite that, employers have been using these types of agreements to try to intimidate and prevent employees from moving to other places. I think this is a good idea. It's going to allow employees to make career decisions. It's going to force employers to treat employees better so that they don't go work for a competitor. So I think that is a valuable thing that will help employees and help the workplaces and even help employers. Keep in mind, employers can still do things to protect themselves. They can have confidentiality obligations with their employees. They can have non-solicitation obligations that prevent employees from stealing clients. So not having non-competes is not a necessary thing. I think this is a very good idea and probably long overdue.
Okay, always educational and always a pleasure. That is employment lawyer Lior Samfiru. Thank you.
Thank you.